Today I'm going to be showing you how I construct a dress from start to finish using no patterns and only my imagination. Keep in mind that my process is pretty whimsical, or in other words, chaotic. There's really no process. If you are a beginner, maybe try replicating some clothes or using a pattern first before you jump into making something completely out of thin air without much of a reference. The fabrics I am using today are a plaid fabric that I picked up from the LA Garment District. This was definitely part of an ex-Disney cast member costuming, but I digress. That's the fabric we are working with tonight. For the rest of this video, I will be in my pajamas, because that is how my best work gets done. As I'm going to be trying on a garment multiple times, this is the most efficient thing for me to be wearing. But that's about all I have to say, so let's get started. So let the record show that I do in fact have a reference image that I am working with here. This was a screenshot from Pinterest. I loosely drafted up a plan on paper based off of that image that I sourced, and if that seems like witchcraft to you, I promise it's really not that hard. However, the crucial prerequisite to this skill is you need to work with what you have. So for example, the bodice of this dress is really just a long tank top. So if I wanted to trace a tank top of similar fabric and similar stretch, it would come out pretty similar to clothes that I already have. The top of the dress looks like a bralette, so I could easily go and trace a bralette that I own, again keeping in mind how much the fabric does or does not stretch, and hodgepodge it all together. This is something that you need to get your feet in the water and try first before you can start kind of just drafting up from your imagination. This is why I recommend altering clothes first, going to the thrift store, taking apart clothes, salvaging the fabric, and really observing how the clothes are put together. And with this plan in mind, we can move on to cutting. So I'm laying down the skirt and chopping off 16 inches along the bottom. So using my tape measure, marking so that I cut evenly, and hacking off a good third of this skirt. And once I have all of this salvaged fabric, I actually lay myself down on top of the fabric and trace my general body shape so that I get an idea of how long or how wide I want it to be. When you are tracing, however, it is very important that you size up. Give yourself as much room as possible, because what is that? Ultimately, what you can do is install a zipper. Always give yourself more to work with, not less. I actually failed and I made it too small, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, so according to my plan, I'm working on cutting out these bodice pieces. I'm basically cutting out two panels that look like the back of the bodice, so like the upper back of the top of a tank top, or the upper back of a sports bra is kind of what it looks like. I'm cutting out two of those, and then in one of them I'm folding it in half and cutting a V up the side so that it creates the front shape, which looks, like I said, a little bit more maybe like a bralette. So now I'm cutting out my lining, because obviously I want varying fabrics and my fabric is a little bit sheer, so I'm cutting out lining to fit the panels that I just cut, and I'm cutting out a lot of fabric to be pleated along the bottom of the dress. Always cut more than you think you need with pleats, just a little tip. So basically what's going on here is that a lot of my panels have lining in them. You know, for example, this skirt fabric I cut up was lined, and I just don't want all these pieces shifting around while I'm working. The other pieces I'm attaching other than this are these pieces that we cut for the top bodice. This is, you know, that panel, and this down here is that panel, but they both have fabric lining that needs to go on them. So I'm just going to take them all under the machine and attach the lining so that it's not shifting around. Okay, don't kill me. This wasn't in the plan, but I'm adding it in. I realized that this height for the bralette was not quite comfortable. I needed a little more room, so I just grabbed some of that fabric and I just cut a rectangle and I folded it in half and I sewed that right onto the bottom, and I'll do that visually for you to see. This is the rectangle, and I just folded that in half. That's the fun of not having a pattern, I guess, is you can just kind of improvise. So here we go. Now we can begin to do a little bit of assembly. I'll be honest, I don't think I made it, I'm pretty certain I did not make it wide enough. It's funny because I was like, size up. If you sized up properly, you will not need to do this, but what I may need to do is just take a little bit of my spare yellow fabric and add some little panels along both sides. I'm going to assemble the entire front piece first and then the back piece second, and then kind of shimmy it on and see how I feel. Also, I just want to clarify, we are going to come back to the pleating that goes along the bottom, but I'm going to save that for the very last so that I can attach it in around. So yeah, let's attach the little bralette part to whichever panel you want to be at the front. So I'm going to attach these two pieces, and then I'm going to attach the back panel and the back piece. And probably we'll end up adding this to give it some more room. Okay, hi, good morning. I honestly could have finished this dress last night, but there's a couple things I want to show you, so I waited until the morning. Firstly, the front and back panels are connected. I made the waist area now too large rather than too small, but that's fine because that's a much easier problem to fix. So it's a little bit big on me, meaning we'll do a size adjustment later. But more importantly, what I noticed when I draped it on myself is that the skirt is not quite wide enough. Like when I draped it on myself, there were some gaps in the dress itself, and you don't want gaps. You want it to look like it could easily be sewn together without being tight. So I cut out 2 panels that are the size of the gaps in the skirt, and I'm just going to sew those into those gap areas, and that should solve the skirt problem. And then we will do a size adjustment, and we will add the pleating on the bottom that was put in the design. And then we will be on our way to being done. Yay! Okay, this is turning out good. Okay, I'm only clarifying this in case you also needed to add in a panel for extra room. I just happened to make it too small and also not flared enough, so I'm adjusting for both those things. In case you had to do this as well, you're gonna have 2 openings. Just pick whichever of these openings looks the most, I suppose, angled so that it would allow the panel to be put in easily. Like this opening is clearly more suitable than this here because this is just straight and there's not a lot of room. That was a lot of jibber jabber. Hopefully you following along, or maybe you're not following along, but if you do, hopefully you won't have to deal with this at all. I'm only dealing with it right now because I did not size this correctly. On the back, this is pretty loose, so I'm literally just folding it in half and chopping off a good amount with the sewing machine. Of course, do a try on in between alterations. There's probably a more professional way to go about many of these alterations, but I would recommend just getting it right the first go. And if the seam isn't ugly, who cares? And then we can move on to the details. So in this case, I wanted to add lace and of course straps. It needs straps. But first we had to even off the bottom of the dress. So I'm cutting it to be even all the way across and kind of getting a visual on how that pleated bottom skirt is going to look. I'm following this hack I found on YouTube Shorts where you just mark a marker every 1 or 2 inches and then kind of combine the markings together. You fold them together and sew along the top. And then of course I always sew halfway down my pleats because they just look horrendous if you don't. And then we attach it to the dress. For these straps, I just grabbed some thin, long rectangles and folded those up like 3 times. I could have done the whole flip them inside out thing to make them really professional. I didn't feel like it. I have so much extra fabric, I could just remake them if ever needed. To attach them, I make markings on myself and pray. As it goes for length, hopefully you have a stretch fabric, so that won't be a big deal. Mine was not stretchy, so I had to be pretty precise. And then the dress was complete. My desk is now an absolute mess. I know that in the design I included like these little, almost like pocket things with the bows on them and a lot more lace. I'm going to add all those details in probably in the next couple of days, but I just want to be able to post this video. I think that's all I have for you today. I hope you guys like it. It's pretty fun. If you want more elaborated tutorials on anything I talked about in this video, please let me know. Thank you for watching my video, and I'm pretty sure that's it. Goodbye.